that 1,000. The only other properties are, should we enable it, and should it continue to fire? Yes, to both of those. Right, we need it to be enabled, and we want it to always fire. All right, so there's our properties. Go ahead into block view. Now, we need a variable for the time, because we need to keep track of the time. So let's create a variable for time. We'll just name it time. And we will initialize this with a value of 10. Because our game is 10 seconds long. If your game was 30 seconds long, you would use 30. But we put 10 here for time, in the time label. Alright, so now we have that variable. And what we want is every time that clock fires, we want to subtract 1 from the time. But once we subtract 1 from the time, we also want to show it in this label. So we have to subtract 1, but then also use that updated variable in the time label. Alright, so let's see if we can do that. Go ahead and click on the time clock. And every time that that fires, all we want to do is take the time and set it to be whatever the time is right now, minus 1. Whatever the time is now, minus 1. So the time minus 1. The time starts at 10. We need that to go down to 0. So for every 1,000 milliseconds that goes by, it's going to subtract 1 from the variable called time. That updates the variable, but now we need to show that updated variable in the time label. So as soon as you have that line of code, just go right up to the time label, and we will set the text to be whatever's in the variable. So very similar to the collision process, where we took the score and we added 1, and then showed that score in the score label. Now we're just subtracting 1 because time is going down while the score is going up. All right, and if I look at my screen now, it is counting down, but it went right past the 0. So probably I just need to restart. Let me see if that works. I'm going to click on connect and just refresh. And it does start at 10, which is good. I already scored a point without even trying. All right, and once it gets to 0, the game stops. Oh, no, it doesn't. The game doesn't stop. It's counting down, minus 4, minus 5, minus 6, minus 7. Why? What do I have to do?
We gotta fix this.
Definitely have to fix it, right? Because we don't want to see negative numbers. We want the game to end. We don't want to play forever.
No.
Zach?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? We only want this to count down if we're above 0, right? If our time is above 0, then go ahead and subtract 1. Otherwise, don't. All right, well, that sounds pretty easy by now for us. Let's go ahead and click on Control. Let's grab an if block, and we're going to set this up. This is just a number comparison, so we can go back to math. We're checking to see if time is greater than 0. Check to see if time is greater than 0. And if it is, then we just want to take these 2 lines of code right here and use this for the true statement. Right? If we are above 0, then subtract 1 from time and show it in the label. So we can just take these 2 lines of code and put it in the true statement, and then take the if statement and just put it right in there with the timer. So it's the exact same code. The only thing that we did differently is we added an if statement. Right? So we only want to see these 2 things happen when we are above 0 for time. So now I notice that it did stop at negative, for me, 71. Let me just run this again. I'm going to hit refresh, and then play this for 10 seconds, and just see if it stops at 0. Alright, it did. It it did stop at 0, but now I have another problem. The problem is, even though it stopped at 0, right, the clock is no longer going, I can still play, and I'm still scoring points. All right, so we solved one problem, but now we have another problem. And that problem is the game still hasn't ended. All right, but what we can do is we can fix that by adding in a false statement. Right? If then else. Right now we have if then, so we have a true statement, but we don't have what happens if it's not true. All right, so let's go ahead and add in the else block. Remember, we can click on this little mutator icon, and we can just drag in else. Else is false. All right, and the way that we can actually stop the game is we can just stop all these components. Any component that has a property for enabled, we can disable that. So that's going to be the ball, it's going to be the sprite, and it's going to be the clocks. All right, we want to disable all of those. So we just have to go into the properties of each one and grab the set enabled block for each one. So the enemy ball, I scroll down to the green property blocks, and I grab the set enemy ball enabled. I do the same thing for the sprite, set hero sprite enabled. I click on enemy clock, go down to the green property blocks, there's an enable block there. And finally, the time clock also has the enable feature. Right? And all these are going to be set to false. So if I come up here to logic, I can grab the false block and make some copies of it. Just snap these in. Right? This is basically going to make it so that you can't move the ball, you can't move the sprite, and the clocks will not count down any longer. Everything just freezes, which means the game, in effect, will be over. So if I just take those 4 lines of code and snap it into the false section, right now everything stops. But just to make sure, I'm going to run it one more time. So I'll refresh again, and I'll play the game for 10 seconds. Right, this is why you don't set it to be 60 seconds when you're building the app, because you'd be wasting a minute every time you're testing this stuff out. All right, so now this froze. I cannot score any more points, but it stopped at 0. So the game works now. We're not finished, but at least it works. You're not going to have people scoring points after it hits 0. It's impossible. So this is some good progress. Alright, let's try to add another feature before we run out of time. Let's just have a notifier pop up at the end of the game telling the person how many points they scored. So it's going to be an announcement, game over, right? You usually see something like that. It pops up in the middle, game over, your score is. Right, we can do that, it's pretty easy. We do need a notifier though, so let's go into designer view. Let's grab a notifier and drag it out. Alright, this is going to be our end of game notifier. So I'm going to name this EOG, end of game notifier. I don't have to change any properties, right? The properties are fine. But what I do need to do is I need to go in and find the notifier that works best for me. So when I click on the end of game notifier and I come down here to the purple command blocks, I'm just going back to the first one that we used in August or September, whenever we first opened up App Inventor. And that's the show message dialog. Right? Show message dialog. So I'll grab that block and I'm going to say that the title is some text that says game over. So I'll grab an empty text string and I'll just type in game over. And then the message is going to be a combination of 2 different things. I want some text that says, congrats, your score is, and then I want the actual score. The score is coming from the variable, The text is just some static text. I'm going to join them together, which means I need a join block. So I go up to text, I grab a join block. All right, it's just two things that I'm joining together. The first thing